Welcome back to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we're jumping right into a process that literally makes or breaks a new hire's experience. Finding and hiring the perfect candidate, that's really just the tip of the iceberg. What happens the moment they walk through the door is where the real magic, or let's be honest, the real disaster actually happens. We're going to decode this entire integration process and figure out exactly how the best organizations transform anxious newcomers into confident, highly productive team members.
Okay, let's lay out our roadmap for today. We're going to hit the first day jitters, induction versus orientation, building a successful program, HR and supervisor roles, overcoming induction challenges, and finally, we'll wrap up with the first 90 days.
Section 1, the first day jitters. I want you to just take a second and think back to the very last time you started a brand new job. Remember that morning commute, walking through those front doors? You probably had a ton of enthusiasm, sure, but also a massive amount of anxiety just buzzing around in your head. New hires are constantly asking themselves, what are my actual responsibilities here? Who's going to guide me when I get stuck? Or how in the world do I fit into this team? These are totally fundamental human anxieties when you're dropped into a brand new social and professional environment. And here's the crucial takeaway. If a company just ignores those anxieties and leaves an employee to figure it all out on their own, the risk of failure is incredibly high. Without a clear structure, new hires get confused, they make totally avoidable mistakes, and they feel completely isolated. Ultimately, they become a huge flight risk. They might just pack up and leave within a really short period, simply because they couldn't adjust. Moving right along to Section 2, induction versus orientation.
So how do organizations actually solve for those first day jitters? Well, they rely on two critical pillars. People toss these words around like they mean the exact same thing, but they really don't. First, we have induction. This is the process of welcoming and integrating an employee into the organization as a whole. Its people, its policies, its culture. Think of induction as a macro, wide-angle lens. It's looking at the big picture of the company and helping that new hire understand how the whole machine operates.
On the flip side, we have orientation. If induction is your wide-angle lens, orientation is your micro, zoom lens. It's a highly planned program that zooms right in on the employee's specific job. We're talking about their department, exactly who they report to, and their immediate work environment. This is the nitty-gritty information they need to just sit at their desk and actually do their job effectively. And this breakdown brilliantly highlights the dynamic between the two. Induction focuses on the entire organization, so the employee understands the big picture right from day one. Orientation is way more specific, usually kicking in right after induction, and it's purely focused on getting them ready to perform their specific daily tasks. They're basically two halves of a whole, perfectly complementing each other to get that employee fully integrated.
All right, Section 3, building a successful program. Now that we've got the theory down, let's talk about the mechanics. How do companies actually build these programs to kill that new hire fear and ramp up productivity? Well, there's a lot of ground to cover. We can basically group the first half of a program into the who and what. You've got the organizational introduction, so company history, vision, and structure. Then you need the HR policies, the vital rules for hours, conduct, and grievances. And naturally, the job information itself, covering those core day-to-day responsibilities and expectations.
The second half, let's call that the where and who else. And honestly, this is absolutely crucial for an employee's daily comfort. It's workplace facilities, understanding safety protocols, getting IT sorted, or just figuring out where the cafeteria is. Plus, it covers the formal introduction to colleagues. Meeting supervisors, the immediate team, and HR early on is a real game changer. It builds those interpersonal relationships right out of the gate, so the new hire doesn't feel like they're just on an island at their desk. So, how does all of that play out chronologically? It generally follows this streamlined 6-step journey. You start with the welcome and joining formalities, transition into that broad organization intro, then zoom in for the department and job role. Next is the team introduction, followed by a workplace tour. But look closely at step 6, follow-up. Do you know how many companies just completely drop the ball on this step? It is absolutely essential to close the loop and ensure the employee is actually adjusting, but it gets overlooked all the time. That brings us to Section 4, HR and supervisor roles. Building out that 6-step journey, that is a heavy lift. It is definitely not a one-person job. You need a coordinated tag team approach. Notice how this perfectly mirrors our wide-angle and zoom lens concept from earlier? HR handles the macro stuff,
They organize the program, explain the big corporate policies, introduce the culture, and do the paperwork. But the immediate supervisor, they take on the micro, daily guidance. They explain the job, assign the actual tasks, guide the employee through the early weeks, and give that crucial, regular feedback. You literally cannot have successful integration without both sides working together.
Section 5. Overcoming induction challenges.
Look, executing all of this in the real world is tough. Even with a stellar plan, companies run into hurdles. You've got information overload, that severe lack of follow-up we just talked about, poor communication, unaddressed cultural differences, and remote employees feeling completely unsupported. The big trap here is trying to cram everything into one single day. If you do that, you basically guarantee your new hire is going to be overwhelmed, and your remote workers are going to feel completely left in the dark. But here is where it gets really interesting. Modern companies are tackling these exact hurdles head-on with digital platforms. To fight remote isolation and fix those pacing issues, they're leaning heavily on digital onboarding. We're talking online orientation videos, virtual welcome sessions, interactive e-learning modules, and digital handbooks. It's totally reshaping how hybrid and global teams support their people, letting them actually absorb the information at a pace that makes sense. And finally, Section 6, the first 90 days. We're shifting gears now from that crazy first week to the ultimate strategic goal, long-term retention. Check out this key insight. Organizations increasingly view the first 90 days of employment as critical for employee retention. I mean, that completely shatters the old school idea that onboarding is just sitting in a conference room for a day, reading a handbook. The window to get this right is so much longer than that. To actually capitalize on that critical 90-day window, organizations have to extend the whole process. They're bringing in dedicated mentors, scheduling regular feedback sessions, and mapping out highly structured learning plans. It's all about building on that initial induction and orientation. You take that early, foundational knowledge, and you deliberately mold it into real, long-term performance and deep employee engagement. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a question to kind of chew on regarding your own workplace. Think about it. Is your company's onboarding process just a one-day data dump that leaves people feeling overwhelmed and isolated? Or is it a carefully structured 90-day journey that's truly designed to guarantee their success? Because as we've seen today, that difference might literally be the reason your top talent decides to stay or decides to walk right back out the door. Thanks so much for joining me today, and as always, keep learning.